Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is really great to see all of you here today for what really promises to be a very special and historic day for Morgan State University. As many of you know, in 2017, we will proudly celebrate throughout that year our sesquicentennial, 150 years of bringing higher education to Baltimore, the state of Maryland, and indeed to the nation. And we have been planning for that year-long understanding and recognition of the importance of Morgan State University to this nation for a while. And so today is going to be a seminal moment as we get ready to open the curtain on 2017 and beyond. And so with that said, I am very, very honored to introduce and to bring to the podium Ms. Stephanie Meeks, who is president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Meeks to Morgan State University.
Thank you, President Wilson, and good morning, everyone. I had the opportunity to give a talk a couple of weeks ago in Charleston, South Carolina, at the College of Charleston, and had a really nice audience like this one today. And I learned after the fact, so I was feeling good about all the people that showed up, and I learned after the fact that they gave extra credit to the students if they came to hear my talk. So now at least a few of you don't look like you're students. So I appreciate you being here today. It's great. So thank you, President Wilson, for welcoming the National Trust today, and Dean Akers, Professor Green. Thank you very much to the faculty, the administration, staff, and students. We're grateful to be with you, and we are looking forward to working together to make this cherished campus of yours a national model for how historic colleges and universities can honor their past while growing the future and leading the world, as you do here at Morgan State University. And I want to especially thank President Wilson for leading the restoration of University Chapel, the first and only campus building currently on the National Register of Historic Places, and we hope that there are more soon on that list. And I also want to recognize other esteemed alumnus here today, Chairman Mafume, as well as Congressman Elijah Cummings, who I believe may be joining us. We deeply appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thank you very much for being here. Now, I know I don't need to tell all of you that this is a hallowed place, that for nearly a century and a half, as President Wilson just said, students have come here and have been inspired by the remarkable beauty and variety of this campus's buildings and landscape. Carnegie Hall, Banneker Hall, Hughes Stadium, Wolford Infirmary, University Chapel, and the Tubman House. And can I just say how great it is that Harriet Tubman is going to be on the $20 bill? Isn't it? It's about time, I'd say. It's about time. But look around this campus and you'll see all kinds of architectural styles ranging from classical to Italianate, modern to brutalist. Many of these buildings were designed by pioneering and celebrated African American architects. And each of these buildings is important historically in its own right, but taken together holistically, they are Morgan State University, and they have created and fostered the rich history, culture, and traditions of this historically black university. Since 1867, young people have come here to learn about the world, to awaken their creativity, and choose the path and discipline that they want to pursue in life. And notwithstanding the remarkable beauty of this campus, we at the National Trust for Historic Preservation believe that historically black colleges and universities like Morgan State University tell an important and often overlooked story. They show us how, even in the face of great challenges and persistent discrimination, vital institutions of learning arose to help African American men and women pursue their dreams. And they have thrived. That is why we named HBCUs to our list of America's 11 most endangered places in 1998. We've been working in Congress to get historic preservation funding for historically black colleges and universities reauthorized. Between 1996 and 2009, that fund invested more than $61 million in the restoration of historic buildings on HBCU campuses. And I know that Congressman Cummings is a strong supporter. Recently, we've been working with Howard University in Washington, D.C. to save their historic Founders Library and to help renovate that place as a 21st century center of learning on that campus. We're doing all of this work because HBCUs don't just tell an important story about our past. They're essential to our present and to our future. As recently as 2009, HBCUs represented just 3% of the universities in this country, but they produced nearly 1/4 of Black college graduates. That's an amazing statistic. Half of the nation's African American teachers and 40% of American health professionals are trained at HBCUs like Morgan State. And as I understand it, Morgan State is the only HBCU actively seeking accreditation in historic preservation. So you have an so your work is especially close to our hearts, and we applaud you and we thank you for that. With that in mind, I'm glad to say that 3 of our 36 diversity scholars this past year, who are chosen from across the nation, are PhD students here at Morgan State. Iris Lee Barnes, Charles Chavez Jr., and Tasha Dupree Wilson. Thank you all for joining us. They participated in our National Preservation Conference in Washington, D.C. last November. So for all of those many reasons and many more, we're delighted to partner with Morgan State University to craft the next chapter in this university's future. And that's why I'm very proud today to officially announce Morgan State University as the National Trust for Historic Preservation's newest national treasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is our signature initiative at the National Trust. It's a revolving portfolio of 80 diverse and important places around the country. My good friend and colleague Brent Leggs will speak in a few minutes about more specifically about our work together. But in essence, what this National Treasure designation means is that we believe this campus is of national significance, and we care deeply about its future, and we want to work with you to craft an even more vibrant future. Often our treasures are facing a serious threat, but here at Morgan State, instead, we're envisioning this partnership as an important opportunity to demonstrate how historic preservation can be a springboard for growth, rejuvenation, and revitalization. As such, we're going to be working here with colleagues to develop a preservation plan that stewards the many remarkable historic buildings on campus while accommodating for the future growth of the university. We strongly believe that historic buildings should not be trapped in amber, left to gather dust behind a velvet rope, but that they should be active and fully engaged and vibrantly contributing to the life of the university today. And working with Morgan State, we're going to help make these historic assets 21st century living and learning spaces while maintaining their distinctive character. We see this as part of our work to expand the scope of historic preservation so that it reflects the true diversity of our nation and so that together we're crafting a more inclusive foundation for our future. I look forward to the journey with you. Thank you once again.
Stephanie, thank you very, very much. Indeed, we are thrilled to get this destination from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It not only recognizes the value of HBCUs across this nation, but also it recognizes the great value, as you've heard, of Morgan State University to this state, to this nation, and indeed to this world. And this destination comes at a very conspicuous time for us, as you heard me earlier say, as we celebrate this university's 150th year, one of this nation's finest HBCUs in the nation. And I want you to know that we are committed here at Morgan to ensuring that our historic structures dance with the rest of the structures that we bring onto the landscape at the university. They will not collect dust. We are committed to taking these historic structures like Holmes Hall and Banneker and the other structures that dot the campus, retrofit them as appropriate without damaging their historical integrity, and make sure that they are serving the purpose for contemporary, challenging, dynamic education for the 21st century. You have our commitment as we put in place the plan for continually revitalizing this campus, bringing contemporary structures to the campus, but at the same time recognizing that our historic treasures must be protected and they must be reinvigorated. With today's announcement, Morgan's place in the history of America has been solidified, because this is not just a beautiful campus, and I hear this from everyone who visits the campus, from the 6th graders from Connecticut to the 12th graders from New York to the 11th graders from Baltimore City and Prince George's County to students who come from all over the nation, that this is a very, very beautiful campus. But it's not just a beautiful campus in and of itself. It is indeed an historic campus. And so from the building in which we now stand, Carnegie Hall, to our signature buildings like Holmes Hall and the very, very iconic Clock Tower, we, the administration, the board, the students, the alums, the friends of Morgan, the citizens of this state, every single day, we live the history of this institution, and we appreciate that history as we traverse this campus. And it is this history that we have always appreciated at Morgan, and we will continue to appreciate. It is an appreciation of our past. It's an appreciation of the vision and the hard work of so many of our ancestors who oversaw the construction of these iconic structures here at Morgan. And those of us who are in the seats today must understand that, as I know the chairman of our board, the Honorable Kwaisi Mfume does, and other regents, in order to protect these structures going forward. And so that is why you can visit our student center this morning. For those of you who are new to the campus, I would urge you to do this. And you can see there the wonderful exhibit that we have of what we call our Morgan pioneers. These are individuals who in the 40s and 50s and 60s refused to accept second-class anything. And they said they're going to lead the way in this country to integrate shops and restaurants where blacks were not allowed to even have an ice cream cone or to go to a theater. And as a result of that, the students here at Morgan became the first college students in America to lead the college sit-in movement. They understood that the individuals who had come before them had played a role in erecting these structures that we celebrate today. They made that connection. It is our responsibility as leaders of this university, as students who are engaged with us in the learning process, to connect what we are celebrating today with the next 50 to 100 years going forward. And so you can also go across campus and you can take a look at the countless collections of African American art and artifacts of any HBCU in the country. And we've been on many of those campuses, and I really value the great art at Fisk University. I value the great art at Hampton University. But trust me, in our James Lewis Museum, we have some of the best art in this country. And I really, really urge you to go over and take advantage of those exhibits because we are celebrating the structures today. But I just want you to know that there are other things behind those structures that Morgan State University will continue to celebrate. And so, as I close the remarks here, let me just say that it is very, very fitting, Stephanie, that Morgan State University is the first historically black college or university campus, entire campus, to be designated as a national treasure by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The first entire campus. And so with that said, it is indeed an honor for me to bring forward the chairman of the Morgan State University Board of Regents, a person that I really had the great pleasure of working with for the last 6 years, the Honorable Kwaisi Mfume. Please join me in welcoming the chair of our board.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Many years ago, as a member of Congress, you'd get up to speak, and everybody had said pretty much what you wanted to say. So you'd say, Mr. Speaker, I seek recognition to speak on that matter because everyone who could speak did speak. It's just that everything has not yet been said. So I want to add a few things to it, and I particularly want to thank all of you in the back for that standing ovation. I really, really appreciate that. My thanks to Dr. Wilson for his comments, for his leadership here at the institution, for his insistence that we continue to move forward as a university together. Ms. Meeks, thank you very much for this designation. Mr. Lax, Professor Green, Dean Akers, where are you? Come on up. Just stand up for a second, would you? Because that's our field marshal. She leads the way on built environment. Thank you very much, and to your entire team also. I'm here to bring you greetings from the board. We are actually meeting at the moment in several committees. We are joined, however, by Winston Wilkerson, a regent of ours. Please stand, Winston. Former Morgan graduate. And Congressman Cummings should be joining us shortly. He is chairing committee, and we hope that many others will get over before we wrap up. But we are doing the work of the university right now. But I want to just, on behalf of them, tell you how important it is for us as a regent gathering, or a board of regents, to sort of affirm what's going on here. When one considers the hundreds of colleges and universities that adorn our nation's landscape, every state in the nation, what is not lost on this notable occasion is the fact that Morgan's historic uniqueness to America and her architectural significance, now officially and duly noted forever, are in fact indeed a national treasure. Now, few probably would have imagined in 1867, at our founding, just 4 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, that our university's fledgling yet ever-evolving built environment would have yielded such a significant honor as it has done today. Particularly, as was noted earlier, for a race of people who had suffered, endured, and survived 3 centuries of slavery, oppression, deprivation, degradation, denial, and disprivilege. And so we take great pride in joining this historic portfolio of sites around the nation on which the National Trust is actively working. And understandably, it goes without saying that the Board of Regents here at Morgan State University join with our president, with our faculty, with our alumni, with our students, and with our staff in thanking the National Trust for historic preservation. And we join also with much pride in embracing this very special and noteworthy designation. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Meeks.
Thank you, Chairman, and especially thank you for taking time away from your board meetings. I know that's a great honor that you've broken away from those meetings. It's my pleasure now to introduce my colleague Brent Leggs, who is a field officer of the National Trust and one of our hardest working and most sought after preservation colleagues in the organization. We've really dedicated one of our very best people to this project, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing from Brent about our work together. Brent Leggs.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. So this morning when I got dressed, I felt like a little kid starting the first day of school. It was so exciting to be here with you today to share this wonderful announcement. With proper preservation planning and commitment, we strongly believe Morgan State University can leverage its historic assets and cultural legacy to fulfill its 21st century mission as an institution of higher learning. As the home to one of 6 accredited HBCU architecture programs, and the only HBCU actively seeking accreditation in historic preservation, we believe, working in partnership, that Morgan State University can be a leader in campus heritage preservation planning. President Wilson, Dean Akers, Professor Green, and Morgan State University faculty and staff have already proven to be exceptional partners. And as the nation's leader in preserving African American historic places, we believe the National Trust's involvement is the critical strategic advantage needed as Morgan embarks on a 2-year campus heritage preservation plan. During the life of this National Treasure campaign, we will raise awareness of Morgan's rich architectural, historical, and cultural legacies, and continue to promote the significance of HBCUs. And we will also develop strategic partnerships for funding support and additional preservation plans. One of the criterion for National Treasure selection is what we call national implications. Through our partnership, we believe that we are developing a replicable planning process and an innovative, forward-thinking preservation plan that will set the standard for campus heritage preservation planning at academic institutions across the United States. So in closing, I just want to say, Chairman Nfume, President Wilson, and to the entire Morgan State University and community, we are delighted to partner with such a distinguished institution and an esteemed faculty here at Morgan State University. So we look forward to our partnership over the next 2 years, and congratulations on being named a national treasure. Thank you.
Brett, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leggs. So as I bring forward the next speaker, Professor Green, I want to do 2 things. First, I want to recognize Dean Akers again for her incredible vision and leadership of the School of Architecture and Planning. And there's a little story here because there's a way in which we got to this point today. And so I want to go back to my arrival on campus and my pushing every single day, and those of you who work with me know that I kind of fashion myself as a get-it-done type person. And what was sort of awaiting us was the old Montebello D-wing that had been vacant over there for years, and of course, was where an old morgue was. And here we are going to the state legislature, getting dollars so we could raise that facility. And then all of a sudden, I get an invitation to come down to the School of Architecture and Planning because they want to know what in the world is this president about to do. He's about to really raise these historic buildings on the campus. And so in my mind, I'm saying, well, so help me understand what is truly historic about Montebello. And so then I realized that in the vernacular, oh my God, we really need to have a conversation. And so I looked out of the corner of my eye, so to speak, and I saw the porch, as I call it, on the chapel that was falling apart. And Dr. Simmons and Reverend Keels and friends of the chapel came to my office and said, Mr. President, we've got to do something, because this is falling apart. And of course, I wanted to do something. And so at the time, I worked with Ray Vollmer and said, why don't we send out an RFP for a contractor to get over there and repair that porch. And so sure enough, we'd gone through the entire process, and the contractor is there, about to start work. When, of course, I got a phone call from Dean Akers and Professor Green saying, well, Mr. President, no, you can't do that. I said, now what is it that I'm about to do except to repair something that is broken? They said, no. You got to really understand the historic nature of this building, and you got to bring all of that activity to a halt. I said, really? So it's a good thing to listen. And as a result of that, we backed off and said, let's do it right. And so even though it took us an additional 8-9 months to eventually do what should have been done, to make sure that the Memorial Chapel was preserved in the way that it should, I think all of you here today will agree it was the right thing to do. And so, let me bring forward Professor Dale Green, because as we got through this process, Professor Green and Dean Akers and the rest of our colleagues in the School of Architecture and Planning wanted to make sure again that the president understood all of the other historic structures on this campus, but also on all of the other HBCU campuses around the nation. And so Professor Green held a conference here on campus and insisted that I review his presentation because he wanted to make sure that I knew about all these iconic structures across the HBCU world. And as a result, he has become just an incredible advocate for historic preservation here at Morgan and indeed across the HBCU world. And we are really honored to call him a colleague. And so please join me in welcoming Professor Dale Green.
President Wilson, I'm honored by those comments and those remarks. And to all that are assembled here today, we have come to celebrate the heritage of this great university and this campus of Morgan State University. This is truly a celebratory moment, and I'm just honored and privileged to be able to share with many of you today in this great occasion. We are celebrating the National Preservation Month, and it is quite fitting that on this third day of the National Preservation Month, Morgan State University's campus has been designated a national treasure. I think that this is quite significant and it is making history yet again. I want to again thank President Wilson for all of his leadership and his vision that has guided the preservation efforts on this campus thus far. I want to thank the chairman, Kwasi Nfume, and all the Board of Regent members who are assembled here today, to President Meeks and to Mr. Brent Leggs, to my faculty, colleagues, administrators, staff, faculty, students, and alumni, to my research associate who has worked very diligently working on this project as well, and to the Friends of the Chapel, and to our preservation partners who are all assembled here, I say thank you and welcome to Morgan State University. But the journey of Morgan has been quite significant over the 150 years. Morgan began with its original founding meeting in December 25th of 1866. And President Wilson hasn't mentioned today, but the bells will ring on December 25th of this year, recognizing 150 years since the original founders met. But in April 30th, 1867, the first class of 9 students met at Sharp Street Methodist Episcopal Church down at Lombard and Pratt Street. And that was the first class of the then Biblical Centenary Institute. But on November 27th of 1867, the university was officially incorporated. From there, the university became Morgan in 1890, named in honor of Reverend Littleton Morgan. And it was at that time that Morgan began its history of naming buildings in honor of individuals, and the first being Reverend Littleton Morgan, bearing the name Morgan. We became Morgan State College in 1939 when the state purchased the school. In 1975, we became Morgan State University. And so that's institutional history. But the built environment and campus history is quite significant and unique as well. As I mentioned, we were birthed out of the basement of the Sharp Street Methodist Episcopal Church, and that campus today is a Days Inn hotel. And so from a preservation standpoint, unfortunately, we do not have the original campus as it relates to Morgan's birth. We moved then from there to Saratoga Street, which today is in the area of the Mercy Hospital site. This was a neighborhood known as Gallo Hills, which was an early free black community in the city of Baltimore. And we were in a house at that property. Unfortunately, that home no longer exists at that site. From there, we moved to Old West Baltimore at the corner of Fulton and Edmondson, And there was a rather large stone building that was at that campus. Today, there is a multifamily housing development that is at that site. From there, we moved to this campus, and we have been at this campus next year for 100 years. And so the centennial celebration of the campus will also reinforce the 150th anniversary of the university. We also had a satellite campus down on the eastern shore of Maryland, known as the Princess Anne Academy. In 1886, the Princess Anne Academy was birthed out of Morgan, and today that is the University of Maryland at Eastern Shore. But from 1886 to about 1890, there were nearly 25 buildings that were erected on that campus under Morgan's ownership. Unfortunately, today, none of those original 25 buildings survive. However, the site of that location is the present-day University of Maryland Eastern Shore's Oval Campus. And so from an archaeological standpoint, there's quite significance at that particular site. In 1893, Morgan continued to grow. It expanded into Lynchburg, Virginia, where there was a Lynchburg, Virginia campus. It was situated on about 12 acres of land on a valley, and it had one stone building, a very large building that was designed to replicate the building that was at Edmondson and Fulton. That campus burned in 1917, the year that Morgan moved to this site, and the 200 students at that campus were relocated to this site. There was a very noted faculty member that was there named Harriet Wolford, who saved many of the students and other faculty at that campus. And as a result, a building was named in her honor on the original campus here. Today, our infirmary is named in honor of Harriet Wolford. So in 1917, when Morgan purchased this land, it was originally 65 acres of land that was associated with the Ivy Mill and Farm. And Carnegie's building, which is just behind me, is situated on this original tract of land. However, 25 acres of land associated with that original tract was carved out intentionally to design and construct a residential community, because during the time that Morgan relocated here, it was during the Jim Crow era, and there was racial segregation laws that barred African Americans from living in the area. And so they created Morgan Park Community, which is just behind the building behind all of you standing, and there are 95 homes that were designed and constructed constructed in that community, and those 95 houses still survive today. And what is unique about that community is that there were several other HBCUs who had to create such communities. However, today Morgan Park is the only community that is fully intact, with all properties still existing in the community with no demolitions. And so that is a very important and significant component of our history as well. The history of the Morgan Park community spans the birth of Morgan at this location, as well as house some of the pioneers of Morgan, both as faculty and administrators, and also up to the World War II era. However, our campus is flanked by both of these two significant communities, one being Wilson Park, where many of our noted faculty members lived, as well as Morgan Park. So on either side of this campus, there were two very important historic African American communities being birthed in 1917 with the relocation of this community, with this campus rather, and they mark the city's oldest historic African American city suburbs. One of the first houses built in the Morgan Park community was Dr. Preservia O'Connell. Dr. Preservia O'Connell was a very important individual in the history of Morgan's University. He was the principal of the Princess Anne Academy, and following him was a gentleman named Frank Trigg, who then became the principal of both the Princess Anne Academy as well as the Lynchburg, Virginia campus. And what was unique about Frank Trigg was that he was born a slave, and his parents were enslaved to the governor of the state of Virginia. But then he goes on to become both principal of Princess Anne Academy as well as our Lynchburg, Virginia campus. And today there's a historical marker at that site recognizing his history. On this original quad, which is behind the Carnegie building, there were several historic buildings that have been created on the campus that bear the names of significant individuals associated with Morgan's history. But Carnegie's building, most importantly, was our first building that we constructed on this campus. There were about 20 buildings that were on this campus prior that were associated with the Ivy Mill and farm. And Morgan began adaptive reuse as early as that year of those buildings and used many of those properties for school uses. However, Andrew Carnegie donated $50,000 to the university when it was still located at Edmondson and Fulton, and it was those funds that led to the relocation of the campus as well as the erection of this building. He also lent his architect from New York, Edward Tilden, to design two additional buildings on the campus. The old power plant, which is the second oldest building on the campus, as well as Baldwin Hall, which was the third building on the campus. All three of those buildings were designed by Edward Tilden, who was Andrew Carnegie's architect. But then the Banneker Hall building, which was formerly the Soper Hall building, lines the campus and is also historic. Holmes Hall, which is named in honor of our first African-American president, Dwight Oliver Wendell Holmes, is also a historic building. And then the Harriet Tubman building, which was designed by noted African-American architect Albert Cassell, and the first building in the state of Maryland named in honor of Harriet Tubman is also a historic building. The Jenkins building, named in honor of Dr. Martin D. Jenkins, is also a significant Brutalist era building, along with the Carter Grant Wilson building, which are named after three very instrumental individuals associated with Morgan. And then Truth Hall, another historic building on the campus. McKeldin, which is another Brutalist era building, along with McMecken Hall. And then to my left, you'll see a picture hanging on the wall of Milton Callaway, which this expansion is named in honor of. He is one of the fathers of science and joined Morgan State University in the year 1916, so more than 100 years ago. So all around us there is history in the land, there's history in the buildings. Edward Wilson was our Register of Wills. The Carter Grant Wilson building is bearing his name. He is the author of the only history written of Morgan from 1867 to 1967. And so we are working now to write the rest of Morgan's history as we go forward. There are significant visitors that have come to this campus, i.e. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who spoke at a commencement address. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois lived for nearly 30 years in the neighborhood directly behind this, Morgan Park. Today, there are 17 of these historic buildings that are listed for National Register of Historic Places, and there are more than 32 buildings that are greater than 50 years old. There are several buildings that were designed by noted African-American architects. Albert Cassell, who is very significant. He, along with 3 of his children, also became architects and elected to the College of Fellows. We had Hilliard Robinson, who was also a significant architect who studied in Germany. We had Louis Fry, who was the first black architect to receive a Master's of Architecture from Harvard University. And then we're joined today in the audience by Professor Leon Bridges, who is one of the deans of black architects in the nation, who designed some of the additions also on the campus. And so Morgan's history is quite significant. And it's more than our buildings, as the president said, the heritage of our civil rights legacy, to the home of Lily Carroll Jackson in the museum, to the spite wall that was built on Hillen Road, to the Welcome Bridge named in honor of Verda Welcome, to the presidential desk that has been passed down, to the Douglass statue, which was the first erected to Douglass in his native land, which is on this campus, to the Negro College murals, to the relief bronze, to the Susie Carr Love Chapel, a room that's named in her honor, and to our first graduate, George M.F. McMecken. I am pleased to announce with our colleagues that all of these significant historic resources have been now deemed a national treasure. We will work comprehensively to document these historic resources for the next 2 years in partnership with Brent Leggs and President Meeks and our own President Wilson and Chairman Nfume and many others here to ensure that the planning for the next 150 years of Morgan State University is intact. And so as I close and take my seat, I'm excited to celebrate with all of you that this now national treasure, this which all of us as students, faculty, alumni, administrators, and staff, we have inherited this awesome, significant historic resource, and it is our responsibility to protect it. It is our responsibility to steward it. And as I close, I leave you with a hashtag, Morgan has always mattered.
So you can really see the power of persuasion here. Professor Green, we're looking forward to the comprehensive book on the great history of Morgan State University. And so at this time, we're going to ask all of our speakers to join me here at the podium, and we'll open this up to the press for any questions. And so President Meeks, Chairman Nfume, Professor Green, and Mr. Leggs. Any questions from the press or others?
What exactly will you be doing in this 2-year period? What is it, the 2-year campaign?
Sure. So for the 2-year planning process is for Morgan State University's Campus Heritage Master Plan process. So every 10 years, the campus embarks upon a 10-year capital master plan. However, the capital master plan doesn't have a special layer, if you will, for the campus's heritage. And so for the next 2 years, we will be focusing entirely on the campus's heritage. So the significant resources associated with the built environment, the natural environment, but I had mentioned the Negro College mural. Many persons are unaware with that. Dr. Wilson said to our visitors to be sure to go to the Student Center. And when you go to the Student Center to visit the exhibit that's there with the stool from the Reed's Drugstore, if you look up, you'll see at the top of the Student Center the Negro College mural that is actually at the top of that, and that was produced in 1952 and is a very significant mural to our history. So we want to look not only at our buildings, but we want to also look at our resources. We want to remember our names. At present, we don't have a naming policy, so as new buildings are constructed and old buildings are taken down, what happens to the names like Soper, in honor of Morris Soper, who was a federal judge who was a strong advocate for Morgan. So we want to make sure we protect not only our buildings, but we protect the historical legacy of Morgan State University for the next 150 years.
If there are no more questions, we really appreciate all of your coming out today. And please join me once again in thanking Stephanie Meeks for the great work that she has done to bring us this day.